Realize the self through prostrating, inquiring, and service. The wise who have the vision of the truth will teach you self-knowledge. When it removes your self-ignorance, you will see all beings in yourself and in me. Self-knowledge can redeem even the greatest sinner. Just as fire reduces wood to ashes, the fire of self-knowledge reduces the results of actions to ashes. There is no purifier equivalent to self-knowledge. Prepare the mind with the Karma Yoga attitude, and self-knowledge will automatically arise in it. Okay? Once we've polished the mirror, then whatever stands before it is going to be seen clearly. There's not effort at that point. The effort is polishing the mirror. So realize the self through prostrating, inquiry, and service. Let's address that first, because it would seem like prostrating, we know what that is, but it seems you're making yourself subservient. That could be a possible interpretation of that, or simply paying respect would be another, but sometimes it can be misinterpreted. People get the idea, oh my gosh, I'm just nothing, and I have to sacrifice my ego, and I'm just, a horrible little worm, and God must save me. Inquiring we know about. And then service. Okay? We don't want to mistake this for that old, erroneous notion of selfless service where you just become a slave to the ashram or something, or, doing work for, well, you're probably paying to do the work actually. So they're not even, it's not even cheap wages, right? So anyway, let's clarify these. Prostrating. Okay, so first of all, there's two ways to sort of look at this. So prostrating, we've talked about, that would seem to suggest bhakti. Should be informed by some degree of self-knowledge. It does begin dualistically, and so you prostrate before a deity, but ultimately the idea is to contemplate the features of the deity. And we'll get into that in more detail when we get to the section on bhakti specifically. But all these deities are imbued with these various ornaments and qualities, characteristics even of their anatomy and whatnot that have symbolic meaning. And if we contemplate those, we develop that X-ray vision I've been talking about, where we can see through the deity to what it represents. And ideally then the prostrating just becomes prostrating to ourselves. We're acknowledging ourselves. The prostration would seem to suggest a humility. Since we recognize it as the self, our own self, and realize that self is all pervasive, it's the self of everyone. And thus, on the one hand, although we are the all-pervasive awareness of the universe, it's no different than anyone else. And so we have a humble attitude. Inquiring, just self-inquiry, using discrimination, dispassion. We've talked about that at length, and we'll continue to do so, but we don't have to go too deeply into that. But then to clarify what this service bit adds up to, sure, it can be helping others in a way that, you're not just seeking personal benefit from. But as we've said, there's really, in every action, it's rooted in this sense of seeking the pleased self. That's what we love, and we can't avoid seeking that. That's really what we're after. We've talked about that. There's no way to not seek the pleased self. So there's nothing wrong with that. We don't want to prioritize gratifying the ego at the expense of others. But all of our service should be, offered in the sense of contributing to the whole, our particular skill set. So we derive joy from it because usually we enjoy what we're good at and what we can contribute, and certain things we do have to, kind of grin and bear it at times, whatever. But there's this balance, okay? It's not about just serving others and then not taking care of myself. We see that with regard to people too. I'm just all about taking care of others, and then at the end of the day, you're a mess feeling unhealthy, feeling tired, feeling grumpy, because why don't I ever get mine? Nobody serves me. There's always maybe a little bit of that underneath. Or even if not, you've just worn yourself out and there's no time left for any contemplation. You just fall into bed and arise for another day of service. Okay, and what, on the path of self-knowledge, that's not going to serve the purpose. And it doesn't make for a very effective contributor, because in little time, you'll probably be performing your deeds inefficiently because you'll all be worn out and all of that. So again, we're back to the idea of moderation with regard to service in this case. Now, also, if you think about sort of the figurative meaning of these, we could say this is Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana, right? Because prostrating would be setting aside your previous notions, all your conditioning, and prostrating yourself before the teachings. Humbling your ego to hear what's being said. And respecting that with the, informed by the idea that, or the realization, hey, nothing's worked so far, so this has a good track record, we'll give this the benefit of the doubt, so we offer some respect to it until we, pending our investigation. But that's the prostrating aspect, so that's really Shravana. And then inquiring, that's when we then, what are our questions? We contemplate the teachings. What doubts do we have? What do we need clarified? What contradictions, apparent contradictions, do we not know how to resolve? So we seek guidance on that. So that's inquiring. Okay? So that would be the manana aspect, Shravana Manana. Now, service, that's when you apply the teachings. You continually contemplate them. You use them to inform every thought, word, and deed. How do the teachings, what would the teachings say to do in this circumstance? Or what kind of decisions do they inform me to make? Okay, and that's the service. That informs any service that you would do. So that's the service to the teachings. That's the best service to the teacher, too. I mean, you hear, about, serving the guru. Serving the guru is doing inquiry. You don't have to massage the guru's feet and all that sort of business, these things you hear about traditionally. I mean, it's all nice because it can be a part of devotional worship and everything, and it's great to show respect and all that, but the highest service to the guru is to really take the teachings in, Shravana, mull them over, what questions do you have, Manana, and then apply them. Nididhyasana. Okay? So that's what prostrating, inquiring, and service are about. The wise who have the vision of the truth, non-dual vision, will teach you self-knowledge. Okay? And this suggests, it sort of skips over the middle stage, but if you are applying yourself, or you're prepared at least to apply yourself in this way, then the teacher will show up. And, some of us, perhaps all of us, have sort of miraculous ways in which the teacher showed up in their life. I'd been, I've told you a little bit, for years practicing yoga and, meditation for years, hours a day, and I even delved into some other traditions and shamanic practices and this and that. And then I got into the whole Neo-Advaita thing, read, I had a wall of books of the Neos and reading them over and over and over again. And I had come across this guy named Stuart Schwartz. He's a disciple of Nisargadatta, and he does some teaching, I guess, or, what the Neos do. And he intrigued me because I started running out of books because, I just keep reading them over and over, the same ones. But, you didn't want to miss one, and there's so many that, we don't have time to go back and reread this, and now we're going to move on to the next. So anyways, I thought, who's this Stuart Schwartz guy? So I Googled him or looked him up on YouTube or whatever, because I'd come across him before. And I remembered he had dark hair and kind of bushy eyebrows and things like that. Kind of looked, Schwartz would suggest he's German, but he almost looked like what I would imagine, German or Russian or something like that, you know, to look. So anyway, the point is, I look him up, and then this Swartz guy, James Swartz, I couldn't remember his first name. I couldn't remember it was Stuart Swartz. So just Swartz comes up, James Swartz. I click on this, and here's this, you know, white-haired guy with the beard and all this. And I didn't think that was him, but it had been a while, so maybe he aged, you know, maybe this was... So I click, you know, and within 5 minutes, many of you have had the same experience, you're just hooked, right? You just go, oh, here's the truth. This is what I've been looking for 25 years. Okay? So, strange ways, when you're ready suddenly and you're just ripe enough, you know, the teacher appears. So, the wise who have the vision of the truth will teach you self-knowledge. And that also speaks to that idea that the teacher-student relationship is one of it's called Sakyabhava, but it's friendship, mutual, you know, respect, and just two people, okay, that are the same, but one knows something the other doesn't quite know or hasn't fully assimilated yet, so you have a little dialogue to clear up doubts so we can all be on the same page, you know? It's not this hierarchy. One's better than the other and all that. And you know, you have to earn being taught and all that. I mean, I know there's the tradition that you know, the guru will sometimes test the student to see, like, you know, do you really want this? That's not exactly what I'm talking about. But that relationship should be a very comfortable relationship because you need to have all your questions ironed out. I mean, like when I was in Siddha Yoga, I mean, you couldn't approach the guru. In the darshan line, you could introduce yourself or whatever, but you couldn't just be knocking on her door saying, like, you know, hey, I have a question about this. Or even, you know, that might be a little bit, you know, you don't want to disturb them or something, but even just, you know, there weren't a lot of chances to have even a small group type satsang. Well, then what good does that really do? Because I've got these questions and I can't get them ironed out. It doesn't really help my growth, you know. So that speaks to all of that here. When it removes your self-ignorance, you will see all beings in yourself and in me. Now that would seem to suggest that there's two of us still. There's Ishwara, and then there's you. Okay? And then, you know, we get all these weird notions like, I'm creating my reality. Well, you know, it's one of those things. It's partly true because your vasanas color your vision, and so you have a different experience than someone else has. But it's not like, boom, I can just, you know, I'm seeing this world and you only exist because I see you existing. When we talk about how everything is dependent on awareness and exists only in awareness, we're not talking about the individual mind. Okay, we're talking about all-pervasive consciousness. Okay? And so there is a transactional reality that Maya projects within, or that is the transactional reality that Maya projects. And that is something that everyone has access to. We all see the same thing. Again, I used that example the other day. We all look out the window and see, you know, Arunachala. Okay? But for some of us, that's a holy mountain. For some of us, it's just a heap of rocks. For some of us, it's, you know, a challenge, a physical challenge. Can we conquer it and make it up to Shiva's feet? So, you know, there's all kinds of different ways of coloring that perception. So that's individual. So that part, you know, you do create, so to speak. All right? But, okay, so back to all beings in yourself and in me. Well, there's no difference. Your essential nature as a person, because here he is talking to Arjuna, you know, as a person. But what he's saying is, when you recognize the true self, your true nature, you'll see that all beings are in you. Just as they're all in me, and you'll recognize there's no difference between that. Self-knowledge can redeem even the greatest sinner. Several ways to take that. Sin, as we said, first of all, is any notion that you're anything other than all-pervasive, limitless, actionless awareness. So anything that may get in the way of that, once you gain self-knowledge, it eliminates that thought. So it redeems even the person who is the hard and fast materialist dualist, or dualistic materialist. Okay, so it can redeem even that person, provided that suddenly something clicks. Also, your past deeds don't preclude you from assimilating self-knowledge, provided that somehow your mind is purified enough. There are examples of murderers and thieves and whatnot that have suddenly awakened. And they pretty much cease those activities. But it can happen. We're talking a lot here about purifying the mind, and so who knows, it probably took some time for those beings to get over that. But, even James talks about how, wow, he was an alcoholic, a womanizer, or at least, really liked sex, and was into making money, and he overate, and et cetera. Just about everything we'd think of as just, the furthest thing from the spiritual path, and yet one moment, kaboom! He has this epiphany, and it sets him on an entirely different course. Now, obviously, that epiphany didn't just suddenly mean that now he was a realized and actualized being, but it changed his direction entirely. It's pretty dramatic. So how could he have been ready for that? Well, as he explains it, he just had a couple of really bad or, deleterious vasanas that would get in the way of spiritual growth, to wear out, and apparently they did it, But so anyway, the point is that's the power of self-knowledge. Again, you could have some experience, like you said. Okay, he did have an experience along with that, but it was the understanding, because the experience came to an end, and then he was just here the same guy. But after he had that, he realized, oh my gosh, there's something more to life than what I've been chasing. So it's the knowledge that stuck and then was the motivator or the seed or whatever you want to call it for his further development. Just as fire reduces wood to ashes, the fire of self-knowledge reduces the results of actions to ashes. Okay, we were covering that earlier today, just in brief. It reduces karma, you could say, which is what the results of actions are. Karma has different meanings. It's essentially, karma just means action of any kind. So karma is constantly taking place. But then we also use it to refer to the karma that we accrue, the results of the actions that are in the form of punya papa, or merit and demerit, that will then warrant like good things happening to us, pleasurable things happening to us, or bad things happening to us. Okay? So anyway, self-knowledge reduces all of that to ashes, not by necessarily ending it, but by negating it. The fan will wind down to at whatever rate it needs to, or your prarabdha warrants, but you're no longer associated with it, or not you're associated with it, you're no longer identified with it, and so it's basically reduced to ash. It's not going to sprout more karma because now I'm not the doer, so you're not going to keep creating that agami karma. And the account is closed on the sanchita, so it just kind of negates all that, so all we got left to deal with is prarabdha, just let it run its course. And that's it. There's no purifier equivalent to self-knowledge. So that's what we mean. It's great to purify the mind, polish the mirror, so then we can register an accurate reflection of the self. But it's really only the knowledge that's going to allow us to recognize the face in the mirror. Okay? The face, like, if you've never seen this person before, and suddenly the mirror is polished, and the face appears, you're still not going to be able to identify it. Right? You're not going to know who that, let's say it's not you. We're just saying, like, okay, so somebody, I guess you'd say even if you'd never seen yourself. So the best example is, like, let's say there's this other person. If you don't know their identity and their face appears in the mirror, you're still not going to know who they are. Once you know who they are, okay, you can't see them in the dusty mirror, but you polish it. And or even, you know, like the warped mirror, like in those fun houses at the fair or whatever. Okay, so you straighten the mirror out, you flatten the mirror, you remove all the dust, and then suddenly, aha, that's, you know, Jim or Ted or whoever, you know, and you recognize. But you had to know first. So, there's no purifier equivalent to self-knowledge. Purify the mind with the karma yoga attitude, and self-knowledge will automatically arise in it. Touched on that right after we read the verse, but the idea is there's no effort at that point. That's what we mean by no effort can get you there. Well, it sure seems like I'm having to put a lot of effort into this, but yeah, it's all for the purification of the mind. A lot of muscle goes into, you know, cleaning the mirror and maybe torching it and relaying it so that it's flat, and then finally it just appears spontaneously. Boom. That's me. Okay. Okay. Verse 39, self-knowledge comes when your senses are controlled, you are committed to it, and you have faith in the teachings of Scripture and the words of the teacher. It brings complete peace. But if you lack faith in the Scripture, you will not succeed because there is no happiness for doubters. O Arjuna, action does not bind the person whose doubts about the nature of reality have been removed by self-knowledge. Therefore, take to yoga. Take up the sharp sword of self-knowledge and slay the deeply rooted doubt about yourself. Okay, self-knowledge comes when your senses are controlled. Obviously, when the senses are controlled, you're not disturbed by all the agitating desires. Now, it doesn't mean all the desires go away. That's why the senses are still being controlled, but you're not wantonly indulging in them. And so, the juice or the air is let out of the balloon. The fuel is exhausted from the engine, so it's not, revving at the same degree anymore. And you're committed to self-knowledge. We're back to that. You got to have the mumukshutva. You got to have purushartha nishchaya, clarity of purpose, and then you got to really want it. Mumukshutva. I mean, that's what's going to take you to the finish line. You develop that over time, but that's what it does. That's what's needed. And you have faith, shraddha, in the teachings of Scripture and the words of the teacher. We've talked about that before. It's not a blind faith. Partly it's based on the idea that, what you've previously known hasn't taken you to the finish line. This has a good track record, so we'll give it a try. But also along with that, the doubts have to be given up, at least provisionally. I mean, if you're going to give it a try, then give it a fair try. Give it a fair shake. Okay? And because if you're constantly just, is this going to work? I'm not really sure. Or all you're doing is looking, for counter arguments, you're sabotaging your own efforts. Because the mind's too powerful at this point. It's still, and the ego, if you want to think of it that way. The ego, part of the inner instrument. So the ego is saying, no way is this going to work. You're this person. And so if you just are kind of like, I'm not really sure, and I'm looking for, I want to doubt everything, then that's the fuel that the ego needs. You're going to fuel that fire, and there's no end to that. It's going to say, right on. We got you by the short hairs. All right, so, O Arjuna, action does not bind the person whose doubts about the nature of reality. Just to clarify, no happiness for doubters. Obviously we see people who don't know the self. They're still happy experientially, but what we're talking about is permanent fulfillment. And it doesn't mean you're walking around with a perpetual grin on your face, or just always ready to just explode in ecstasy. Okay, it's like, you're secure. You know you're fine no matter what happens. And oftentimes you're actually gleeful. So that's good too. You know, nothing wrong with that, but it just doesn't mean that that's what defines it. Okay? So there's no happiness for doubters. Oh, Arjuna, action does not bind the person whose doubts about the nature of reality have been removed by self-knowledge. That's what removes the doubts. So again, we're back to the fact that you're not a doer, so the actions are not binding you. You know you're all pervasive, perfectly full, so you don't need anything. Therefore, take to yoga. So these are the reasons. I've laid it out on the table. This is why you should take to yoga with enthusiasm. Go get them. Okay? Take up the sharp sword of self-knowledge and slay this deeply rooted doubt about yourself. Great figurative image there. Kali in action. Okay? Take the sword. Slay the demons. These are the real demons, the vasanas. So, take no prisoners. Leave the bloody carcasses on the battlefield. So it's it's another way that we can use our ignorance as a means for self-knowledge. Because when a doubt arises, now you've been informed. Okay, we're telling you, doubts are going to arise. When they, and they're false. They're giving you false information. So, when a doubt arises, no longer should you say, oh yeah, I believe that. And you shouldn't even say, oh, well, I'm not really, is that kind of how it... No! Grab the sword, slay the bastard. Okay? Boom. Be done with it. So you know now. That's what you do. No excuses from here on out. Oh, I'm not really sure if I'm up for the battle. No, you are. You are up for the battle. That's what this Bhagavad Gita seminar is about. We trained you for battle. This is boot camp. All right? Get your game on. Okay.